Audeze's LCD-1 headphones are a great choice for mixwork in the studio. They're lightweight and their planar magnetic drivers are really punchy and tight across the entire frequency spectrum, and this is exactly what separates them from all of the competition at about their same £400 price point, because as well as having excellently defined highs and cymbals and snares, they've got exactly that level of waveform reproduction in the bottom end, and arguably it's better than some of the bigger diaphragm models. It's just so tight and punchy, and that makes mixing really easy, where you can hear exactly where something sits in the mix. So there's a couple of secrets that I want to share with you to getting the best translation out of them, and that is exactly what this video is about. So stick with us and find out how I do it. There's two ways that we're going to be looking at to nail translation with LCD-1. One is a bit of tonal rebalancing. We're going to use an EQ for that in the same way that a program like SonarWorks Reference 4 Headphone Edition does, and give you an incredibly even tonal balance that is going to be really like working in a high-end control room. And if you're used to working in high-end control rooms, then that should be really the type of tone that you're used to mixing with. The second area is nailing the mix positioning. So that's volume and stereo positioning. And we want to replicate a set of studio near fields as accurately as possible, because if it sounds right on a great set of near fields, then it's going to sound right in pretty much any situation that it's played back in, be it speakers or headphones, because it's going to sound like every other commercial recording that's done to pretty much the same standard. And the gold standard that I kind of look for is this sense that all of the sound gets put in front of you, exactly where the speakers are in a control room, and it's almost like it's on a plane. So rather than it being all around you and encompassing, what I'm after is to have the sound in front and to be able to move up and down virtually to really just nail where something sits in the stereo field and the volume of it and how that interacts with the mix. That should be the sensation that you get after we've finished all of this. We're going to start off looking at the imaging and the positioning. So to do this and to get the best translation possible, we want to be looking at something that provides crossfeed, and that is the amount of sound that gets picked up by the opposing ear from one speaker. So whatever comes in the left speaker gets picked up in the right ear, and whatever comes in the right speaker gets picked up in the left. What we really want to do is to get it to sound like a control room, and there's a few options for crossfeed. You could, if you've got a lovely DAC like the RME ADI2 DAC, use the crossfeed feature that's built into there. It's also available on the SPL Phonitor headphone amps, but again, we're talking upwards of 2 and 3 times the price of these headphones to get that feature. So what I'm going to show you today is using a plugin, and this plugin is excellent. In fact, this plugin is arguably better at doing this than both of the two hardware devices. They're kind of great because you can leave them just on the output to your headphones and leave your master bus free, but we'll be looking to position this plugin as the last or second to last plugin on our master bus or our monitor bus if you've got a DAW like Cubase that has one of them. Okay, so here's my master bus, starting with a gain plugin, a EQ that goes out to my hardware limiter. I've then got Metric AB, which is a brilliant comparison plugin, and you can swap back between what you're doing and a selection of other reference material. highly recommended that you do that, but you've got to make sure that if you are using a comparison plugin, that you do it before the correction plugins. So next up, I've got the EQ, and then last, I've got Can Opener Studio. So let's open up Can Opener. This is Goodhertz Can Opener Studio 3, and here's my recommended settings for LCD-1. So I'm using the expanded mode, which gets me access to all of these settings. Hyper realistic crossfeed realism, dither on. I've also got HQ mode on. I've got a pretty powerful computer here, so there's no problem with that. And I can take the little bit of latency that it does bring in. Nothing going on the EQ, 60-degree crossfeed angle, and 100% on the amount. Now, if we run the track through, you can see here actually kind of what it does. So we get crossfeed, but you also get the monoing of the lower frequencies, exactly the same as you would do if you got it in a control room. You can see there on that 100 hertz point, there's bits that were going out. They all get brought in. It really tightens up your bottom end and gives you a much more familiar feel to be able to do the mix work with. That is pretty much it for Can Opener. If you are older like myself, you may feel that you might want to add on a dB or so of treble at this point. I normally do it about 2 or 3K, just to help you position those hi-hats. Handily, why I've got this on my master bus is, in fact, it can compensate for the Fletcher-Munson curves or equal loudness curves. Often if you mix a low volume on headphones, you'll find that your bass isn't quite sitting right in the mix. Well, on here, if you just look at this little graph here, you can see as you bring the volume down, it brings the bass up and the very high treble up to compensate for this. Really handy if you're doing long sessions and you want to give your ears a break without changing the tone too much. I find about 70% compensation is the good point for this. And you can see there, you can bring it back up. Always bring it back up for when you're finishing and your final run throughs. The second thing we're going to look at is EQ. We're going to readjust that tonal balance and give you that control room-esque feel that you should be used to working with. Today I'm using Fab Filter Pro Q3. I think this is the best EQ for this job. If you do have it, absolutely use this. If you don't have it, you can take the EQ points that I give you and put these into an EQ of your choice. I love Pro Q3 because it's incredibly transparent and it's got the natural phase mode, which I think is the perfect balance between the standard low latency mode and the linear phase mode, where you get a bit of pre-ringing. But natural phase I'm a massive fan of, and I think it works really well for headphone correction. Now, the other plugin we're running here is Fab Filter Pro Q3, so I'll bring it up. You can see there's quite a lot of activity here in the mid-range, and that is because these two bands here are compensating for that hyper-realistic curve in Can Opener. Though how much will be up to you, because we've shown here the difference that the plugin is making in hyper-realistic mode, but otherwise, we've pretty much cloned the curve out of Audeze's Reveal plugin, and with a couple of little tweaks just to linearize that bass response compared to what Reveal does, but for the compensation of Can Opener's hyper-realistic mode, probably somewhere about halfway in between it will be about right. So if you try taking a dB off each one of the 2 points, that might get you into a really good place. You don't have to use Pro Q3. It is my favoured EQ for doing headphone correction with, simply because you can swap between the zero latency, natural phase and linear phase modes. I really like natural phase for doing this correction, and it doesn't have the pre-ringing that linear phase does. And I just think it's a really good EQ anyway. But you can just take the points replicate these in an EQ of your choice and run this however you would like to. That is how to get the optimum sound out of LCD-1 for mixwork. Now, there is another angle here, and that's that programs like SonarWorks have the ability to run system-wide. In other words, to be able to process your built-in system audio. So if you've got Tidal or Spotify that you're using to play through reference material, it can go through the correction curve from SonarWorks. Well, what if you're not using SonarWorks? What if you're using the custom plugins and, of course, using Can Opener that I've just shown you? Well, then you'll want to host a plugin chain for your system audio. And we've done a video on exactly that you can find here. And otherwise, go and have a play. If you've got any further questions about LCD-1 and mixing, please leave us a comment. Otherwise, look out for the codes word, because there's some stonking deals if you're in the UK or the EU. And otherwise, we'll see you for another video again soon. Thanks a lot for watching, and goodbye.